No.
Okay, back to the heart. Let's get back to circulation.
What's your sound?
As we said before, this is the core of the system. Okay? If this isn't working, nothing's working. Okay? So we talked a little bit about the left ventricle. A lot of things happen here. Okay? This is the biggest, the most profound, the most strongest, the most useful chamber of the entire heart. So it gets overworked because it is having to pump blood from here through the entire body. And it's already used Jesse as a reference earlier. If we don't eat right and we start getting high cholesterol and a lot of calcium in our system, that causes a disease. Does anybody remember what that's called? Arteriosclerosis is the buildup. Once it starts brittling and sticking to the walls, we call that arteriosclerosis. Okay? And there's a diagram in your book that shows the arteries. Without the disease, it's big and open. But as this disease process progresses, the interior diameter of your arteries gets smaller and smaller. Well, if they get smaller, it makes this chamber of the heart pump harder to get through the blood, or to get through the artery, get the blood through the artery. So in essence, what happens is, if everything is working fine, on every contraction of the left ventricle, we get a pulse, right? Get that pulse. And when we measure that pulse with a sphygmomanometer, what do we get? BP. A BP. And we're mainly looking at these pulses is what part of that BP? Systolic. Systolic. If it's normal, we say a man's age plus 10 is a good systolic. Up till about 40. Okay? That's an old just rule of thumb. Okay? We're going to say everything's normal, we're going to have 120 systolic. What is the diastolic on that same diagram right here?
How much pressure there is in it when there's no contraction?
It's the residual here, right? So if this is the systolic, this would be the diastolic. It's the resting pressure. Okay? So if we start getting a buildup inside this artery, what do you think the systolic's going to do? It's going to go up, right? Because the diameter of their pipe has got smaller, and to force the blood all the way through the system, it's got to create more pressure, so our systolic is going to rise. What's the diastolic going to do?
It's going to drop. Right? Or stay.
It's going to rise as well. Okay? Because we're narrow, say we go 160, it's not going to go as low to rest. This is more narrow, so your residual pressure in there is going to rise as well. So it may go up from, say, initially 75, may go up to like 90. So at what stage in a diastolic pressure do we consider hypertension or high blood pressure? Anybody remember?
I only know the systolic.
Like number-wise,
What is hypertension
is it 90 to
on a
90?
diastolic?
100 to,
90.
I said 90 to 100.
90 is considered hypertensive. 80 to 90 is called pre-hypertension. Okay? What is systolic hypertension, Anthony?
140.
140. So if you've got 142 over 92, what would you be considered? Hypertensive, right? Is 142 over 92 going to be detrimental to anybody's health at that right there?
Yeah.
It's uncontrolled, constantly.
Probably not, okay? It's hypertensive. What does hypertension lead to?
Diabetes.
God.
Can lead to a
Bless you.
bunch of
Thank
stuff.
you. I didn't even hear that.
Okay, it leads to a bunch of things. Diabetes can be one. The thing that we worry about most with hypertension is stroke. We haven't talked about head injuries yet, medical stroke, but this is a good point. How can hypertension, high blood pressure, cause a stroke?
Bless you.
If it's so high, it's easy to fill out.
What is a stroke?
Aneurysm in the brain.
Not necessarily an aneurysm.
It's a blood clot.
Could be a blood clot, can cause a stroke. What else could it be?
Is it cholesterol? Isn't cholesterol fine?
Yes,
So could that break off?
that could be a thrombolus or an emboli in the brain, yes. But
Isn't
if,
that stroke really where it just cuts off the blood circulation to that part of the brain?
for a reason, stroke can be caused by many things. But back to our picture right here, if we start building up this arteriosclerosis turns into arteriosclerosis, where it becomes plaque, and it hardens, and it becomes brittle, what has it done to the wall of that vessel? It weakens it, right? So, our main arteries, they're big. What about our arterioles? Can they get the same stuff built into them? What about all the way down to the capillaries? Can we get that same buildup in them? Exactly. So what happens if we're pushing, say, 180 systolic into one of these little bitty arterioles in the brain that's brittle? We have a rupture. What happens downstream of that rupture? No O2. We call that stroke. Or an infarction in the brain. We hear about myocardial infarction. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Okay. But high blood pressure leads to potential strokes. That's the worst case scenario with high blood pressure. You can get some residual stuff. It helps with diabetes, overweight, that, diet, cholesterol, all that can help with diabetes as well. Mainly the number one thing is diet. Leads to more diabetes in the human population than anything else right now. It's actually, I want to call it epidemic. Because now 1 out of 3 kids are developing type 2 diabetes. And as much as 50 years ago, it was 1 out of 300 had signs of diabetes. What do we feed our kids?
Crap.
Candy bars, potato chips, junk food, McDonald's, nuggets, but they ain't got no chicken in it. It's all chemicals and I mean, we don't feed, 50 years ago, where did people get their primary food from?
Chicken.
From the chicken coop in the backyard?
From the garden. They grew their own food. They canned their own food. They raised their own chickens. They raised their own beef, their goats or whatever, or neighbors or whatever, maybe 60 years ago. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's still like the 1950s. Garden was
Yeah.
so good.
I remember growing up, my grandparents had huge farms. We went down every summer and canned food. We canned corn, beans, peas, tomatoes, carrots, beets. I mean, it was all fresh grown stuff canned in mason jars, and raised his own beef and hogs. And, but you didn't hear about people with diabetes as much as you are. They had some cardiovascular diseases because they ate a lot of flour and a lot of processed gravy. You gotta love gravy, right? You like gravy, Jesse? I love gravy. That nanny biscuits all the time. Yeah, I love gravy. That is nothing but cholesterol tainting the veins is all grease is all that is. Right? It's good stuff. But you look at what has changed over the years, okay? Cancer. Let's just kind of deviate a minute. Back 60 years ago, there was cancer, but it was usually caused by something they knew. Somebody was working in a coal mine and they had stuff in their lungs, or they knew that 60 years ago you didn't get cancer from smoking cigarettes because the smoke is bad, but it didn't have chemicals in it. Did you know a Marlboro, if anybody smokes in here, I'm just going to give it to you. The leaves in a Marlboro that used for that red package cigarette is only 15% natural. Everything else is chemical enhanced. So when you're smoking, you're not getting natural smoke from a burned leaf like they did 60 years ago when they rolled their own. You're getting chemicals. Everything is chemicals now. I mean, they're not smoked up to a couple of years ago, but it's the chemicals that's causing all problems. People that smoke reefers, natural grown herb, you know what? There's no known case of cancer from marijuana right now.
There's actually.
There's not, because it's a natural. Now, when it becomes legal and they start mass growing it and adding chemicals to it and pesticides to it and all this to keep, then you're going to start seeing a lot of problems. But natural herbs right now is not causing cancer. It's chemicals. Look in, I'm just going to look on the back of your, what is this? This is candy. Made in Mexico, I guess.
Froze.
But it's written in English. It's cucumber. It's pickles. I was going to look and see what all's in it. I can't read it.
Get Darian, he has gummy bears.
I have gummies. Do you want to read mine?
Yeah, but it's probably small too.
It's actually not that small.
Sugar, corn syrup. Corn syrup is a artificial.
Mine is corn syrup, sugar, water, gelatin, citric acid.
Acid. Keyword acid.
But if you look at the bottom,
Vegetable. I didn't know that.
What the hell is chocolate? I didn't know.
if you look at extracts and colored with all this other kind of stuff, it's chemicals. It's all chemicals. That's what we're putting in our bodies. Potato chips.
Oh man, that's a good stuff.
Yeah.
It's got malted Drexten. Yeah, tell me. It's got cultures of cheese.
By the way, have you tried the flaming?
It's got salt enzymes. The what?
The flaming olive.
I like they're all dressed. Well, that's the best barbecue tip right there. It's got natural and artificial flavors. It's got, let's see, lactic acid, garlic powder, artificial colors, yellow 6, yellow 5.
All over it.
Huh?
Garlic powder all
We
over
were
it.
talking about the stroke. I asked my dad how much he had. Remember how he had a stroke? My dad said that when we had a risk to moving a little bit, they over-medicated her.
Can happen too. Yeah.
And they said that she was over-medicated and they caused her to have a stroke.
So, medication can cause strokes. Weak veins can cause stroke. Arteries can cause strokes. Thrombolysis can cause strokes. Embolism can cause strokes. No, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just getting my point.
I have a question about mini, or TIs.
The what?
TIs, mini ones,
Okay?
What's a TI?
mini strokes.
Oh,
I heard,
It's a transient ischemia attack.
because you never know what brings them on. My granddaddy's had millions, he can have 100 of them in a week. I heard that when you're asleep and you quit breathing for a minute, that can cause, because everyone quits breathing at some point in their sleep. They just don't ever notice.
Not everyone.
Well, not everyone, but it
People who have
happens.
sleep apnea.
It happens more than people think it does.
Yeah.
Can that cause a mini TI, just the loss of oxygen for that quick seconds, or?
Okay, first we got to define transient ischemic attack. What is ischemia? What is ischemia? Lack of oxygen, right? We talked about it last week in respiratory. Ischemia, no oxygenation to the cell, so you're not perfusing. Okay. Transient means it just happens and goes away. It corrects itself. So transient ischemic attack is a brief moment in time. For some reason, there is no oxygen provided to the brain. TIA. So, quit breathing. Is your heart still beating?
Yeah.
Yes, your heart's still beating. okay? It's still circulating blood. You've still got all the 21 or 16% or 11% or 5%, depending on how many times it has gone through your body without taking a breath. If it's 4 minutes, you're gonna be not coming back, you know, quickly, okay? So, stopping breathing, technically, no, to answer your question. Now, what can cause a TIA? We have what's called arterial spasms. Okay, they can be caused by an electrical impulse, nerve impulse. The brain and the nervous system is nothing but electrical pathways, in and out, telling us what to do, okay? So if one of those nerves happen to cross, and in it doing so, it tells this arterio to constrict so that it shuts off, and now the blood that was flowing is no longer flowing. For that brief second, anything downstream of that is not getting oxygenation, so it becomes ischemic. So it can be from electrical, it could be just from a spasm in the artery, it could be from a brief occlusion, if you've got arteriosclerosis, where you've got small bits of particles circulating, and it gets to a spot that it can't go through. It will
High
occlude
blood pressure
downstream.
cause many ones too?
High blood pressure can cause a spasm, so there is literally hundreds of things that can cause them. But going back to yours, stopping breathing, in my mind, I mean, I've not done a complete study, but if the heart's still circulating blood and it's still got oxygen in it, and I just stop breathing for 10 seconds, okay, or 30 seconds, I'm still circulating blood. That's not going to be the initial cause. Now, respiratory drive, either hypoxia or oxygenation, or all the other receptors that's in the system, if one of those goes haywire, it could actually collapse an artery or, you know, spasm it or whatever. So it's usually it's something that has caused ischemia in that part of the brain for a brief moment. And then it comes back. And yes, many people have thousands of them. They say, though, if you have TIAs, it is leading to the big one. Because at some point in the future, whatever was transient is no longer transient. It's going to be an occlusion, and you're going to have the
Hundreds of
full.
them, and she had her
full
stroke 2 months ago.
So it can happen.
And
So,
strokes are genetic, right?
Are they?
They haven't,
I'm going to say no.
or what was it? The research hasn't showed that yet.
You can have artery disease that is genetic, but most strokes are caused from an occlusion or a rupture. 90% of them is an occlusion from thrombolus, something that broke loose in the artery, okay, and plugged it. The only reason you're going to have stuff in your arteries is from diets, poor diets, high calcium, high cholesterol, high different stuff to get in there. Or you've got a weakness in the ruptures. or
So when they
injury or
ask you
something.
for your, say your background and stuff, and they wanna know if your parents have had strokes, they ask because of the artery stuff, or because they
Could
just
be,
wanna know?
could be. I mean, there's no documentation that strokes are hereditary in many researches they've done. But artery disease is. Hypertension can be, okay, hereditary. There's a lot of things that aren't, it's kind of in the RNA or DNA of the system, okay, a malfunction there. So, and that's why we ask, if you've got heart disease, maybe they can find out what's causing it so our kids don't grow up with it. Or if we're susceptible to high cholesterol because we eat a lot of flour, maybe we don't want to give as much flour to our kids, Okay. So, artery disease leads to stroke, leads to high blood pressure, okay? It also leads to malfunction because the harder this has to work, the more oxygen it takes, right? Makes sense? If it works harder, it needs oxygen. So where does the heart get its oxygen from? Good question, right? Gets it from its blood. Does it absorb it out of the blood that's going through the heart?
I'm assuming that there would be veins off of, or arteries.
The heart muscle is like every other muscle in the body. It has arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules, and veins. Just like every other tissue in the body, okay? Where the heart gets its oxygen from is from the right and left coronary arteries that come off of the aortic arch. One feeds the right side, one feeds the left side. They all branch off, and then you've got actually 4 main coronary arteries, and they break down even more. They run along the outside of the heart, okay? Veins, after the capillaries, returns it back into, dumps into here. It doesn't actually go back into anywhere else, it dumps it right back into the right atrium. But your arteries, how many of you know somebody that's had a bypass? Double, quadruple, triple, whatever bypass, okay? What they've done, they've gone in there and they've had to take an artery from the leg or some other part of the body, usually a vein. They'll take that vessel out and they'll put it in line because the artery on the heart has collapsed or occluded so they can't do it. The thing they do now, more so than anything else, is a stent or a balloon. And they'll actually go in there, put a screen downstream from it, stick this little device in there and blow it up, or scrape the artery, catch all the debris that comes loose. The problem with that debris is it could get into the brain and create an emboli or a thrombus, create a stroke. They go in there and put a balloon in there, which opens the artery and allows blood to flow to the heart again. Okay. So, people used to think that the heart, since it's pumping blood, just absorbs the oxygen. It doesn't. It has to have the same circulatory system as every other cell in the body. And it can occlude. That's what causes, if you occlude an artery feeding the left ventricle, which it happens more often than not, we have what's called a MI. Myocardial infarction. Infarction is the death of cells. The M is myocardial, which is the death of cells in the heart muscle. The classic heart attack, as he was telling me today when he was reading or listening, you know, it talks about myocardial infarction, in parentheses, classic heart attack, okay? Classic heart attack is nothing but an MI, myocardial infarction, where the artery has become occluded or blocked. You're no longer getting oxygen downstream of that artery, and the tissues start to die. And if it happens in the heart, we call it an MI. After about 4 hours of no oxygen, the heart muscle that's affected downstream of the occlusion is dead and cannot be revived. Up to about 4 hours, though, if they can break loose the clot, open up the artery, usually the cells will rejuvenate and don't have any permanent deficit. That's why a lot of places have what we call an MI or STEMI. That's an ST elevation in an active MI. And we'll talk about ST elevation momentarily. You go straight to a cath lab. And they're going to go in there, they're going to knock you out, they're going to run a cath up through your femoral artery. Now they're actually doing it through the radials as well. Going in there with you're under a scope, radiograph, and they're looking exactly where it's at. They'll find that occlusion, they'll go in and blow it up and put a stent in and get you circulation back immediately. And people survive the heart attack without any major deficit. In times past, you had a heart attack, you went to your local hospital, they would watch you for like 3 days. If you've got an occlusion before they could get you into a cath lab, because they weren't as popular, you just lost heart muscle. And so you had nothing to save. Now it's very important for even like outlying hospitals like here to recognize a STEMI, ST elevation in an active MI, get you to a cath lab real quick, or get you some thrombolytics. Thrombolytics, if it's an occlusion from an embolus, something's broke loose, got in that small artery, the chemical will eat it up, break it up, and open it back up. Most of the time, you need a cath lab to figure out what's going on, though. And so we have bypass protocols. If you're having a heart attack, we're gonna carry you to Odessa. We're not carrying you to Crane, for the most part. Because Crane can do thrombolytics, but they don't have a cath lab. But that's only recognized if you've got ALS on board, because we're the only ones that can actually read the monitor to see if we're in an active STEMI or not. If somebody's having a heart attack, chest pain, and we have basics on there, the AED's not gonna tell you that. You're gonna transport here ASAP. They're gonna put a 12 lead on there. They're gonna read and say, we've got a STEMI, and they're gonna fly you to get you to Odessa ASAP. Okay? So it's important to understand what happens. So, talking about the left ventricle. Say late stage MI, okay? And all this falls under the category of an acute coronary syndrome, because it's something that's causing the heart to fail. If we say the left ventricle fails, we have an MI, and the left ventricle can no longer pump. What would we expect to see on our patient? A low blood pressure? Yeah. What else?
Irregular heartbeat?
A weak pulse?
Or no?
Won't they be turning white? Not like necessarily white, but first like a
Pale.
lighter
Pale.
pale.
You're gonna call it, cyanotic? What else?
Ventricular fibrillation?
Oh, you're wrong.
Purple fingertips?
That's still part of
Oh,
cyanosis.
okay.
What else are you gonna see?
Respiration.
Trying to get
What's
the breath
your
out?
respiration's gonna be?
Higher.
You're gonna see
Agonizing.
elevated respiration. What's your pulse gonna be? That's the trick question.
Is 0 or very weak?
Low. Is this gonna be opposite from your,
It's gonna be weak,
yeah.
thready. Why is it thready? It's a term we use, kind of weak and thready.
Because the ventricle left, with that word again, I can't think of
Atrium
it. Atrium is
is having to push it.
pushing it
It doesn't
through.
have the power, which is gonna cause a low blood pressure. It's not putting as much out. That's
So
why
it's
you're
not
gonna
bringing
be
enough
cyanotic.
in.
Your respiratory rate is up, why?
Because there's not enough, like oxygen is not being.
Because your brain's saying, hey, dumbass down there, give me some oxygen,
Yep.
breathe a little faster, okay? Weak thready pulse because it's coming from here. What else do you expect to see?
Them about that.
If this is pumping, and this is pumping, and this is trying to pump, but it's not, what are we gonna see here?
Hypoxia.
If the blood's not going out here like it should,
Pulmonary edema?
yes. PE, edema, pulmonary edema. What is edema? Swelling. It's also caused from
Doesn't
fluid.
part color.
Fluid, okay? So if we're got pulmonary edema going on, we're building up fluid, what could our patient be doing?
Swelling.
What are they coughing up?
Man.
Sputum. In what color would that sputum be? Pink, frothy. And what do we call that in a nutshell? CHF.
Congestion heart failure.
Congestive heart failure. better known as CHF. How many people do you know has got CHF?
Tommy died
Okay, so we're talking about left-sided failure
of.
here.
My uncle.
What happens if it's not the left side that fails? Left side's good. But our right side fails. What do you expect to see?
Respiratory distress.
You would feel a pulse.
It's gonna be opposite of what.
Okay, you still got a pulse,
So
right?
strong pulse.
What's your blood pressure gonna be?
Normal. Well, weaker, because it's having to force the blood through the
It's
lungs.
gonna be a low BP. Why?
It's forcing the blood through the lungs, not like being pulled, if that makes sense. Like it's because I'm assuming when the right ventricle is pumping or moving it to, like it's creating a vacuum, which relieves some of the pressure to force the blood through the system.
Pretty good. This is a vacuum in the right atrium, by the way. Didn't say that earlier.
Just saying,
Okay. And that plays an important part later.
pump truck operator over here.
So,
What?
we've got high pressure and negative pressure right here. Okay. Go back just a little bit. Your arteries contain no valves. They control pressure by dilation and constriction. Okay. To shunt blood to different areas, they'll constrict or open up. Veins, on the other hand, have valves in them to allow blood to go only one way. If you've been in nursing school, you've ever started an IV, you try to avoid the valves, okay? Because it will sure mess up the catheter and goes to the whole vein. So the pressure that goes to the right atrium, there is no pressure basically. It is, you lose your pressure in the capillary beds at the exchange, okay? And then just residual kind of pushes the blood through, just kind of forces it through with no pressure. And then as it gets here, the pumping action of the right atrium, because this is just oozing in, helps create pressure to here. The right ventricle actually has the pressure to the lungs. But you can actually get a negative PSI. Well, millimeters of mercury. It's what we measure pressures in arteries. It can be negative here to help pull the blood. In trauma, we talk about in trauma chapter, if you have any problems with punctures, penetrations up in this area, you can get what we call pulmonic emphysema or subcutaneous emphysema as well, because it will actually suck blood through the skin, under the skin, and it feels like when you mash on it like Rice Krispies. It's weird. It's weird. So, okay. But what you're going to see here is it can't pump the blood to the lungs, but this is still pumping it to the body. Okay? So if you walk in Walmart and you see that 350-pound woman whose ankles are as big as her thighs, you ever seen that? She got them sandals, but they're just swollen. Okay? I'd ask you to take the boot off, but I'm not going to.
Scotty
Huh?
has them like that, right?
Scott has them. If I wear socks, I mean, I don't have congestive heart failure, but just because I stand on my feet a lot, if you ever pull your socks off and you see that ridge where it was at, what you're doing, that is actually a restriction, venous restriction, and it's causing fluid to build up in your legs. And if you will go below that and you mash, you can't. I mean, I can do it. Sometimes I don't want to. Right here. It's called pitting edema. What happens is you're not getting that fluid returned to the heart. It's pooling in the lower part of your body, and it's called edema. Okay? That edema will build up, and it will rupture cells, and it causes cellulitis, and it causes all kinds of problems, okay? That is caused from right-sided heart failure. So if you see somebody who's got extremely swollen legs, they're probably going to be on multiple medications. They're potentially on oxygen because they're not getting enough circulation through the lungs to oxygenate well. They're going to have congestive heart failure on the right side. Do we treat that in the field?
No, I'll ask.
How are we going to treat it if somebody's in congestive heart failure in the field?
I'll ask.
High flow O2 because they got to perfuse, okay? If their heart's not beating, we can beat it for them. If they're not breathing, we can breathe for them. But typically what we're going to do is high flow O2 at a basic level because they need oxygen. What you're going to see is they're going to be dyspneic. They're going to be rapidly breathing initially. They're going to have low blood pressure unless they've got arteriosclerosis on everything else. It could be a high blood pressure. They're going to have low blood pressure, extremely pitting edema. They may have what we call wet lung because it can actually lead to left-sided heart failure as well. So congestive heart failure can be either or both. And what you're going to see is pink frothy sputum, swelling in the lower extremities. They're going to be very short of breath, and it can lead to cardiac compromise, MI, etc. Okay? So that is pretty much that part of the circulation and what it can cause. For anybody that read the book up to that point, have I covered everything to that?
Yep. I was just going through it with you.
So everything's pretty much been covered except until we get to the electrical conduction system, right? If anybody would like to take a picture of this, take it now because it's fixing to all be erased. Make sure you've got the 18 steps written down. It's very important. I'll get out of the way if y'all want a picture.
Dun, dun, dun.
Maybe Scott can edit that.
So far then?
Is that?
Okay, now, does that make, I ask this question, does that make the cardiovascular circulatory system easier to understand if we know how it goes all the way through? It makes you understand if you get a hole in it, you got to plug it because you got to keep the fluid in it. If one side ain't pumping, you got to pump for it.
So I get that we're about to get to the electrical portion of it, but do the atriums contract? Or is it just a?
No, they all contract, and we're fixing to talk about
Okay,
it.
I know that, but what would happen if one of the atriums fails? Could you go with that?
That's what we're going to go through in a minute. It's still congestive heart failure, okay? But what it does in a nutshell is the atriums preload the ventricles. That's their primary purpose, okay? It's to preload. If they're not able to preload, they're not going to have as much stroke volume or minute volume, which reduces the amount of blood that's circulating through the lungs, which results into inadequate perfusion. Congestive heart failure. Okay. Okay, here we go. Let's take it away. You had your chance. Oops, I didn't take a picture. Sorry.
Oh my God, guys.
Quit Snapchatting my foot. I heard the phone's going. I can't believe y'all put my stripper pole on Snapchat.
Oh, I got a one of it.
I should have gotten money off of that. My
Put it on
entertainment-
Snapchat.
My entertainment's not fun. Something bit me. I'm bleeding. I'm bleeding. What do y'all do about bleeding?
Let you bleed out.
We're gonna dive in.
Y'all gonna let me die, right? I see how you are.
None of us have gloves.
Have somebody give you a easy one.
Okay, let's start again with the picture of my heart. This is going to be the electrical conduction system, okay? In a nutshell, we're going to make it try to be easy to understand. This, majority of this is above and beyond your scope of practice, but in order to understand what your AED is looking for, you need to be able to understand the basic concepts of the electrical conduction system. So I'm going to draw my heart again. I'm going to draw my 4 chambers. And this is the what?
Right atrium,
This is the
Left
left
atrium.
atrium, right
This
atrium,
is the,
left ventricle.
and I drew a green line right here a while ago. What is it called?
The subcut,
Septum.
no.
AV septum. AV septum, right?
What am
What does AV stand for?
Atrioventricular. So I'll just write over here above this line, that's the atrium. And below this line is the ventricles. That could be very important in a minute to understand that concept, okay? So we talked earlier about the cardiac muscle. What is something unique about the cardiac muscle itself, Gabby? This Gabby, over here to my right. What's something unique about cardiac muscle that no other muscle has? Do what?
Has its own electrical system.
It has its ability, every cell in the heart, actually cardiac muscle, if you look at it, looks kind of like bricks. Kind of like a brick wall, isn't it? Okay, and in each one of these bricks or cells is a disc. And it's called an intercalated disc. Why they named it that, I have no idea. But each disc has the ability to produce and or transmit an electrical impulse. Okay? We call that phenomenon automaticity. I think that's how you spell it. Don't take me from my word. Automaticity. Okay? So the heart has the ability to create its own electrical impulse. Okay? Some of y'all that's been around long enough, what does a muscle do if it is introduced to electricity?
Contracts.
It contracts. If you were to grab a line of electricity, hot, your muscle's going to contract around it, okay? You're going to grab it. That's why when you're checking for, and you should never do this in the field, but if you're checking to see if something's hot or not, you do it with the back of your hand. Anytime you go to open a breaker box in the oil field, they will tell you before you grab it to tap it with the back of your hand. Because if it's going to shock you, it's going to throw you away from it. You're not going to grab onto it and electrocute yourself. Okay? It's just a safety. So, if there's an electrical impulse going through this muscle, what is that muscle cell doing? It's contracting. And that's very important to understand. That's how the heart works. Is whatever path that electricity is taken, is it goes through here, where you've got a big cell, when the electricity goes through it, now you've got a small cell because it is contracted and got smaller. Well, the entire heart is a big muscle. If it contracts and gets smaller, what's going to happen to what's inside it? It's going to push it out, right? Okay, it's going to increase the pressure and cause it to go out. That's the basis of a contraction. And what causes the contraction is this electrical impulse. So, let's talk about where that electrical impulse starts.
So we weren't supposed to draw the boxes?
You can, it's all fine.
Oh, okay.
You do you. Whatever floats your boat, that's fine, okay? So, gonna do this in a different color. What is the normal heart rate of an adult? 60 to 100, okay? And we call that an inherent heart rate. That is a normal heart rate for an adult. Normal heart rate, adult, 60 to 100. Okay? So where does that need to come from? It comes from a certain part of the heart. And we have in the right atrium wall, up towards the top where the inferior and superior vena cava come together, we have an area of specialized cells that we call the SA node. Sinoatrial node. SA. Okay? This spot in the right atrium, under normal conditions, normal heart function without disease, creates the initial pulse or impulse, the initial electrical charge that creates a heartbeat. And if it's working perfectly, its impulses is between 60 and 80. And we call that the inherent heart rate of the SA node, 60 to 80, okay? I mean 60 to 100, I'm sorry. Forget 80. Somebody told me 80 the other day and it stuck in my head. It's 100. 60 to 100. We call that normal, right? Okay.
And what would you call it though? Like, cause you have your heart rate, so SA, what is that? I mean, I get that it's a node, but you wouldn't call it the heart rate, would you?
Your heart rate, yeah. That's how many times you're beating a minute. That's how many impulses this is sending in a minute. Which is causing the heart to contract
Well, I get that, but
to
would
create a
you,
pulse.
but would you say that the SA, like you call it an impulse in that sentence?
It is an electrical circuit or electrical charge, but it is the inherent heart rate. That's the rate at which the heart is contracting based on the electrical charges being sent out of the SA node. Okay? So what happens, we have the SA node, okay? And from the SA node, there is some intra-atrial pathways. What that is, off of this SA node, there's more like, it's like roadways, okay? That will go through the left atrium, all the back of the heart as well, all the atrium, and then they all come back together right here, from the back, okay? As this impulse, or current, or charge, however you want to say it, is traveling out of the SA node through this, what's that muscle doing?
It's forcing
So,
blood into the ventricle.
Where's the valves at? Here, right? is we've got the tricuspid valve on the right side. We've also got the semilunar pulmonary valve on the right side. On the left side, we've got the bicuspid valve, and we've also got the aortic valve, right? Okay? So, the impulse from the SA node, if it's working right, as it starts its way down towards the septum, it is squeezing the heart. Anybody ever milked a cow before? Milked a goat before?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay? Where do you start squeezing the teat to get the milk out the bottom?
The very
The
top.
top. Okay, so if I want the blood to come out the bottom of the atrium, where do I need to start squeezing from?
Top.
The top. So my contraction starts at the top of the atrium. As it contracts, it pushes stuff down so it can push it into the left ventricle. Y'all follow that? Okay. So, we call that the intra-atrial pathways. Okay? And they all come together to another specialized set of cells right here on this septum. It's almost on the right septum as well. Okay? But coming to these, where all these things come together, for some reason they decided to call them intranodal pathways. Okay? And the reason they do that is because this specialized set of cells right here is called the atrioventricular node, otherwise known as the AV node. Okay?
That's on the second.
Huh? That's right on the septum, yes. In some terminology, you will also hear this group of cells called, where it all comes together, the AV junction. And y'all know what a junction is, that's where everything comes together, right? So that's, you may see that term again. The AV junction is right below the AV node. Okay, in reality. Okay? So, if for some reason the SA node doesn't work, it gets tired, it says, I'm not going to create a charge anymore. I'm done. Forget it. I'm giving up. The second pacemaker site, and we call these pacemaker sites, the SA node is a pacemaker site with an inherent heart rate of 60 to 100. The AV node is called a pacemaker site. Site, S-I-T-E. Okay? And it has a inherent heart rate of 40 to 60. Okay? So if there's other signs we'll see when we get there, but if a patient's heartbeat is at 50, there's a good chance that the SA node's not working. That the heartbeat's coming from the AV node. Okay? All this is going to make more sense in just a minute because I've got to finish the diagram. We'll come back and talk more about it. Okay? So once we come out of the AV junction, there's a group of cells right here that we call the bundle of His.
Thank you.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Right at the bottom of it?
Yes, right at the AV.
Okay.
These right here are kind of combined together. AV node, AV junction comes together.
It says bundle of His.
And then right below that is the bundle of his.
What does that say about, bundle?
Yes. The book says this right here. Okay. What happened is, the cardiologist that figured this out many, many years ago, his last name was Hiss. And he figured out what his bundle of fibers were. And so it gave it his name. Well, over the time, they have dropped the double S and went to his. So you will see it, depending on your cardiology books, some of it still refer to it as his, and some refer to it as his. Okay? One S or two S's. Okay, coming out of the bundle of his, we get into right and left bundle branches. What that is a large branch, looks like a tree branch, of intercalated disc again. You've got one that comes down the right ventricle, comes up from the bottom of the heart and comes up this way. On your left, you've got two of them. Come down, back up. Okay. And on these right and left bundle branches, there are little fibers starting down here at the bottom. And they work back all the way up this ventricle. Okay? And what we call those fibers is right and left. And then we've got Purkinje. P-U-R-K-I-N-J-E. Purkinje fibers.
What was the one right before that?
Right and left bundle branches.
Oh, okay.
Right. So let me ask you a question. We talked about if the electrical charge starts in the SA node and it travels down this path, it contracts the atrium from the top down, right? Where's the valves at out of the ventricles? They're on top of the ventricles, right? On the septum. So, would you want to contract the ventricles from the top down? To make it efficient, you'd want to do it from the bottom up, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens, let me talk about this just a second. In this AV node right here, if you blow it up on a microscope 1,000 times, it looks like a spring. It's just circled just like this. Okay? And when the charge from the SA node makes it back through the intra-atrial and intranodal pathways into the AV node, it comes in the center and it has to go through all of this spring. What's that doing? Slowing it down, right? So it slows it down a little bit, and then it kicks it out through the junction and bundle of His, down through the right and left bundle branches until it gets to Purkinje fibers. When it hits the Purkinje fibers, those are out in the muscle. What does the muscle start doing? Contracting. So it starts contracting from the bottom up to force the blood out the valves back in the septum. So how do we know that we've got the delay in the heartbeat? Anybody listen to somebody's heart with the stethoscope the other day?
Yeah.
What does it sound like? Lubbed up, lubbed up, lubbed up, lubbed up, lubbed up, lubbed up, lubbed up. Below is the atrial contracting, forcing the blood down. We said we talked about preload earlier. The atria has to contract before the ventricle if it's going to preload it. So there is a 1/10 of a second delay. I think that's what it is, something like that. Okay? 1/10 of delay in the AV node that causes it so the atrium can contract. Then it goes to the bottom of the heart and contracts back. If you hear it through the valves, it's kind of what it sounds like too. You'll hear heart sounds, S1, S2, S3. You'll hear cardiologists talk about those. It's different sounds through the valves, etc. if they're listening for. So if everything's working right, we've got a heart rate at 60 to 100. It's going to contract the atrium first. It's going to go through the AV node that jumps in the right and left bundle branches. And a 1/10 of a second later, it's going to hit the Purkinje fibers and it's going to do the bottom. We're going to have that heart rate 60 to 100, normal heart rate. Okay, 60 to 100. SA node inherent heart rate. This is something you need to write down. 60 to 100.
What, heartbeat?
Heart rate, SA node, 60 to 100. Okay? AV node. Now here's the problem with this. If the SA node decides it's not working anymore, and the AV says, okay, you're not going to give me a heartbeat, I'm going to give you one. So the AV node starts sending out the impulse to contract the heart. Anybody see a problem with that?
Yeah.
On the atrial side? What's the problem?
It would be sending out the wrong heartbeat. I mean, it's.
Sends out the wrong direction, right? So if it sends it out from here, which way is the atrium going to contract from?
The top or the
It's
bottom.
going to go backwards. It's going to
Yeah,
go to the bottom up.
Opposite.
So is that going to be able to preload your ventricles like it ought to?
No.
It's going to reduce your
No.
stroke volume, right? So you're not going to have as much preload, so you're not going to have as much stroke volume coming out the bottom. Okay? The thing is, your AV node can only produce a heart rate of 40 to 60. So you don't have as much blood pumping, and it's not beating as fast. So what's your patient going to be? Diaphoretic. Their breathing rate's going to be higher. They may be dyspneic. Okay? They may be hypoperfusing, diminished LOC. They could potentially even have chest pain, depending on what's causing this to do it. If it's a myocardial infarction that's causing this. Okay? This ain't working, but this is. Can a person live with a heart rate 40 to 60? Yes. Not good. They can't walk across the floor. They've got congestive heart failure because it's not pumping enough. Okay? It's just like there's a problem with the circulatory system, now it's with the electrical system. Slow it down.
Living with it and it being that way, slowly it kills you because it's just not.
Over time, yes. Okay? But you can live here. You can live with it. Your just lifestyle has to change. Okay? So what if this fails and this fails? We're up a creek without a paddle. Unfortunately, or fortunately,
Didn't the book say that each cell can do it on its own accord?
yeah, we'll get there in just a minute. Okay?
Stop
Fortunately,
jumping ahead.
Purkinje
What he
fibers.
said.
Okay, is it G or J? Over there's a J.
Purkinje
Over here's a
fibers.
G.
PPP. Purkinje fibers.
I'm saying G.
Oh,
But
this
it's-
is
it's
a
I'm
J.
saying
J or
it's
J?
G or J because you have it different. There we go.
There you go, thank you.
Purkinje fibers are the third pacemaker site. They themselves can create electrical impulse. Okay? Their inherent heart rate is 20 to 40. Can a person live with a heart rate of 20?
No way.
No.
Not for very long, okay? It ain't gonna happen for very long. So what do we have to do?
Pacemakers.
Pacemaker, exactly. So what's a pacemaker do?
Pumps it for you, or,
Pumps the heart.
It's an external device they put in your chest that they send wires into the left ventricle typically to create an impulse to contract the ventricle. Usually there is no atrial pulse on a pacemaker. It's usually just the left ventricle because that's the biggest muscle in the heart. That's the one that really gets pumping. Okay? Sometimes it will be an AV pacemaker, but most of the time it's a ventricle in the left ventricle. But that's what happens if you go 20. Okay, now, Leslie said a while ago, and the book says, that every disc that we talked about a while ago has the ability to create its own electrical impulse or electrical charge. So what happens is, this fails. Remember where the heart gets its blood from? Top of the aorta, right? Okay. So the heart needs blood too to oxygenate itself so it can keep working. So if this fails, the ventricle starts saying, hey, I need some blood. Something needs to work so I can get electrical charge so I can contract. If I can't do it without you, we got to work together here, okay? So the AV node steps up to the plate and says, okay, I'll do it. I can't do it as much as the SA node, but that lazy sucker, he's not working, so I'm going to do it for you, but I'll get you the best I can. Well, this wears out. It's not getting the preload that we need, okay? So the ventricle says, hey, I got to do something. So the Purkinje fibers jump in there and say, well, I can't do much, but I can do a little bit. So this one starts firing, and 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 this one starts firing. Every one of them can fire between 20 and 40 times a minute. But if they're, each one of these fibers can create a 20 to 40 contraction or pulse. So what happens if we've got 1,000 of them doing somewhere between 20 and 40, but not at the same time? Has anybody ever heard of fibrillation? Okay? So they're trying, but now what you've got is a bowl of Jell-O.
isn't that VFib?
Ventricular fibrillation, yes.
Quivering instead of.
It's a quiver because every place that Purkinje fibers is contracting, it's just right there. So this and this and this and this and this and this and this. So the whole heart looks like this right here. There's no organized contraction, so how much blood are we pumping? None whatsoever. So we don't pump no blood, what happens? We don't perfuse, we have cellular death, we die, okay? So, every one of these cells can create its own charge, but they originate in one of these pacemaker sites. Okay, does that make sense? So, what does a normal heart rate look like? There's a picture on your paper that I told y'all to diagram.
60
Okay?
to 100.
Huh?
Normal heart rate 60 to 100.
60 to 100. What does that look like on a graph?
Oh, it's like.
Okay? So we're going to draw it. And I'm going to show you what you're looking for.
So then it's number 2.
Yeah. Hey, snap that later, man.
No, it's text. Sorry. So, if you look on a monitor, okay, it's got a screen on it. And usually your heartbeat is gonna be based off of what we call an isoelectric line. It's a neutral line right down the middle. Anything above that line is called a positive deflection. Anything below that line is called a negative deflection. If you know anything about electricity, you've got a positive charge and a negative charge, okay? We're not getting into depth about that, but just know a deflection. When we're talking about the pulse or the impulse or the charge initiated, and a normal heart rate is going to start from the R or the SA note, okay? When that thing creates a charge and it starts going through the atrium, it creates a contraction of the atrium. And electrically, it looks like this on your isoelectric line. It is a positive deflection.
Which is the arterial.
And we call that positive deflection the P wave. Okay? It is the first positive deflection on the isoelectric line and is created by the SA node. Okay? So this is what I'm looking for. This is the P wave. When I ask you to label that diagram, that is the P wave. Okay? You know, I told you about that little deal, the AV node looks like a spring. Okay? The next little line on there kind of goes right along this isoelectric, means there is no electrical charge taking place. It's at zero, it's at neutral. What's happening is that charge that comes from the SA node to the AV node is in that spiral, okay? So we call this the PRI. It's got a long term, but I'm not going to worry about it, okay? That is the delay between the P wave and the contraction of the ventricles. The first negative deflection is called the Q wave. And it's going to have a little bitty deflection to the bottom side, okay? On this picture, you can just barely see a deflection below.
It's called a what?
Q wave. That is a Q. So this is the P, this is the Q. Okay? The next positive deflection would be called the R wave. That's going to go up. Okay? What do y'all think this is? The Q wave is basically when that electrical charge hits the right and left bundle branches, or out of the bundle like this. So you've got a Q, then you've got an R. If it happens to go negative, we call that the S. And then it comes back up and it reprofuses, picks up oxygen, you're going to see another positive, and we call that the T wave. Okay? The T wave is the reperfusion of the ventricles.
Between the S, the Q and the S, top.
R. So you've got the P, the PRI, which the PRI is only important in time, which it's not important to you as a basic. But if we're looking at heart blocks, first degree, second degree, third degree heart block, we're looking at a time here. Okay?
All these are waves, right?
Yes.
So R wave, that's wave.
We also look at the QRS complex and its time, because that tells what we're having problems in the ventricles or not. When you're in ALS, this makes a whole lot more sense. I'm just diagramming the heart wave to y'all, okay? You heard me talk about STEMI a while ago. STEMI. That is it. MI being myocardial infarction, a STEMI is ST elevation. So what you're going to see right here on this ST is it doesn't deflect as far down and your T wave comes way up. What that means is your ventricles are having a problem getting oxygen for some reason. So you're having a myocardial infarction in your ventricles. We can actually see this on a monitor, and we call it a STEMI. That means they need to go to a cath lab immediately. Okay? So that's what we look for, ST elevation. When I'm looking at somebody's heart if they're having chest pain. Okay? So, but that's above and beyond what you're on. When you're looking at the monitor, if you put on an AED that's got a monitor on it, this is what you should see, okay? And it should be steady. When you're checking a pulse, the ventricle contraction, remember, checking a pulse is the contraction to the left ventricle. If it's regular, that's going to be your R wave, the contraction of your ventricle. The time between, the delay between your pulses, your P wave, PRI, your QRST, and it's going to continue on for it to be regular. The time difference between here and here is the same every time. Okay? Regular, you can feel regular, but at the ALS, if you go advanced or paramedic, we'll actually give you calipers and you will actually figure out whether these are actually regular. And 99% of the time they are. Okay. Plus you can tell if you've got looking at the strip and you see one here, then all of a sudden you see another in here. It's not regular. Okay. You can visualize that. So what we call this, without this right here, is a NSR. Normal sinus rhythm. Normal means it originates here. Sinus means originates in the sinoatrial node, SA node. Okay. To be NSR, it's got to be 60 to 100. Okay.
So a question. So earlier, when they were in class, we had this paper. So the quiz, number 4, said what determines whether the heart rate is regular or irregular, and we said a pulse. But according to what we said, it would be the time between.
It would be the time between. That's more advanced. This is actually an advanced quiz, is what this is.
So, do we write the time between them?
You could write their time between R and R interval. You could write time between pulses, because that's basically what it is as well. It's the time between pulses. And you'll be able to tell whether it's regular or not. Okay? Either way. Okay? The other rhythm that y'all may possibly see in the field is what we call VTAC. Ventricular tachycardia. Okay? And if you see that on a monitor, got your same monitor here. You've got your same isoelectric line right down the middle. Your ventricles are contracting greater than 100 times a minute. It can be caused from multiple Purkinje fibers that happen to be synchronized. It can be caused from an overactive AV node that's sending multiple charges into the ventricles, but the top of the heart's not. What it's going to look like is it's going to be a very regular VTAC is regular, okay? But it's at a rate greater than 100. But all you see on the isoelectric line is the ventricular response, like the R and the S wave, okay? You do not see any P waves. What's happening to this person?
Shock.
What kind of shock? If you're gonna throw shock out
Septic.
there, septic infection,
Heart infection, heart,
which
That's
is
not
called
hard.
cardiogenic, okay? But what happens right here is if the ventricles are going at over 800 times a minute, are they getting to fill up with blood? Are they moving much blood? Are you going to feel a pulse? Yes. You will feel a pulse. It's going to be very rapid. But your patient is going to deteriorate. They're going to start having diminished LOC. They're going to be cyanotic. They're going to be diaphoretic. Probably going to have some chest pain if it's caused from a myocardial infarction. And at this rate, they are either having one that has caused the irritability, or they will have one because they don't have oxygen getting to the heart. Okay? This right here, you're looking for symptoms. Treat the patient, not the monitor. I have actually seen patients sitting there talking to me normal with ventricular tachycardia. Now, it's not going to last very long, but I don't need to do anything. I don't need to shock them at this point, okay? If they become symptomatic, diaphoretic, shortness of breath, diminished LOC, your AED is going to send a shock to the heart. We'll talk about that in just a minute, okay? And what it does. Remember what an AED is? It's automatic external defibrillator, okay? It was shock for only 2 rhythms. 2 rhythms only. One is this, V-tach. The other one is, I'll draw our box again. With our isoelectric line in it.
Defib.
And what you're going to see here is just a bunch of nothing. Okay, it's going to be no rhyme nor rhythm to it, no regularity to it, no positive deflection equal, no time-wise. What's happening right here is all of these Purkinje fibers are firing on their own, and the heart is sitting here quivering, okay? How much blood is that pumping? I've never seen a conscious person in that right there, okay? Not moving any blood, the brain don't get any blood, it goes unconscious real quick, okay? This is called ventricular fibrillation. F-I-B.
What did you say causes VTAC?
Huh? Irritability in the ventricle. It can either be the AV node or the G fibers. The ventricles are just contracting at greater than 100 times. Okay, it can be lack of oxygen, oxygenation, it can be all kinds of stuff.
Just like K, hurry up.
It goes crazy. VTAC will lead to VFib every time, if it's not correct. Okay? VFib is dead. Okay? The only way to fix VFib is to defib. So, we talked about an AED. And we've talked about it, you put the pads on, and we did it in the CPR class, you put the pads on, one high, one low, and you charged it. And if it said shock, it recognized either one of these 2 rhythms. And it said shock advised, and you mashed the button. Boom. So what are you actually doing?
Shocking the heart.
Establishing a better rhythm.
What you're actually doing is mashing the reset button. Okay? you are sending a large volt charge of electricity through this entire muscle. What you want to happen is where this is going above and beyond everywhere, you want it to all of a sudden go here. You're neutralizing every electrical charge in the heart, with hopes of either this or these synchronized give you a rhythm. What you'd like is for this one to kick back in and say, hey, thank y'all. And you come back in with a P wave, Q, R, S, and T.
And isn't it
Get
like
back
really
into
critical to stay, like monitor your patient after that because they
Yes,
could be
because if
wasting
they've been there
fluid?
once, they'll go right back to it, highly possible, okay? Whatever caused the problem is still there, whether it's an infarct or whatever, but temporarily, you have neutralized the heart of all electrical activity, giving it an opportunity to reset, to try to do a
Start over.
regular heart rate. That would contract from the top of the atrium, work its way down, and contract to the bottom of the ventricles.
Is it possible that
Okay.
after you defibrillate it, that it could start over and not happen again? Or?
Yes, or it could never convert. If there's a problem with all of this, if the heart's already dead from an MI, it may not give a charge at all. So what do?
CPR until you get to a hospital?
We do it until they get there, they can put a defibrillator in it, they can try to capture and actually shock the heart each time forward. I mean, there's things they can do. We've got to get them there with circulation and perfusion, okay? Hence why it's very important when you respond to a cardiac arrest or cardiac problem to immediately put the AED on a patient who's having chest pain. Because if they go into the fib, VTAC, VTAC, VFib, you're immediately able to shock and reset, okay? The longer you wait before you do this, the lower their chances are of surviving. This is why in this CPR class we say, start compression, circulation, and get the AED on as soon as possible. Okay? Don't delay, get it on there ASAP.
What does the rhythm look like if it's from the AV node?
From the AV node,
Yeah. Like what's the difference in the way the rhythm looks?
there is no P wave. Your Q will be positive, your R will be negative, your S will be positive.
So it's just reverse.
It reverses the rhythm.
And what's that for?
It's if it's a junctional or from the AV node.
Oh.
Okay, but don't get confused on that, that's way up there level, that's not basic.
You're welcome, Fred.
Because the other thing you can do too is when you put on the leads, you know, we'll have basics put on the cardiac leads, and they say RA, LA, LL, and RL on the 4 primary leads. That means right arm, left leg, and right leg. Okay? And in the monitor it's set up so that you're reading positive to negative. And if you've got your salt, which is on your right arm, and you've got your pepper, which is your black, this is white, which is on your left arm, and then your right leg is green. Oh, right leg is green, and this one's red, okay? If you happen to cross them to where it's looking at it at a different angle, it will look junctional, only it's gonna be at a rate of 60 to 100. And so it's lead crossed, not junctional rhythm, because you're looking at it in the opposite direction.
So just wherever you put your things can mess it up.
Yes, and so it's very important that when it says LLRA, that they go in the right place in order to read it.
Otherwise, the paramedic's gonna freak out.
Yeah. Do you understand the electrical conduction system? It's complicated, but it's really simple. The other thing that we can see, and that I always want to end on this note, no matter what we have learned tonight on the circulatory system, the electrical conduction system, everything, if you walk away with anything at all, this is what I want you to remember. Treat the patient,
Not the monitor.
not the monitor. I can see a normal rhythm on a monitor, P wave, Q wave, RST, perfect, a rate of 80, but my patient's dead. Because the muscle, the heart, is both mechanical and electrical. I can have the electrical charge going through the heart just like it's supposed to, but if there's a mechanical problem because of ischemia, it may not be contracting. But if I look at the monitor, it shows I've got a pulse. If I say, hey, I've got a great pulse, my person's dead. Always, always, always check a pulse. Treat the patient, not the monitor. Got it? Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes Carrie Ingram's Cardiac 101.